Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about and explore something subtle, something which is invisible in most of our daily lives, and yet it reveals a lot about us. Justifications. I'm not speaking of explanations or thoughtful reasoning, but justifications, which is what we offer before anyone asks. This is what spills out of us defensively, and it usually feels urgent and necessary and almost compulsory. And the core idea I'd like to explore today is how these justifications expose our insecurities. Let's start with what is a justification. At the surface, a justification is a reason given to defend an action. But psychologically, it is something a little more delicate, a bit more subtle, because it is rarely about informing others and more about protecting ourselves. When we justify without being questioned or accused or challenged, that's because something inside us is feeling threatened. Something inside us is anticipating judgment. Something inside us is fearing rejection. And we rush to explain. Why? Because somewhere inside, we're not really at peace with our own decision. When we are internally settled, we state. When we are unsettled, we justify. There's a big difference between saying, I won't be attending, or saying, I won't be attending because I've been really tired and I've had a long week and I need some space and I need some time to myself, and it's not about you. The second one does sound considerate, but it does reveal a kind of discomfort with simply choosing. When we justify unnecessarily, we're not managing facts, but we're managing fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of disapproval, fear of not being liked. What we're doing is creating an emotional shield that we disguise as logic. Now I'm going to share a few scenarios where we justify as examples of what we reveal in these sort of situations that happen so much of the time. One is the promotion justification. This is fairly common. You get promoted, and somebody congratulates you or asks you if you were so, and instead of saying, yes, I was promoted, what you say is, it's not that big of a role, and honestly, they didn't have that many options, and I've been there a long time. What does this reveal? It reveals a discomfort with success. It reveals a fear of being seen as arrogant. A belief that success must be softened with something else, perhaps humility. I'm not sure. It perhaps reveals a bit of imposter syndrome as well, that you don't really deserve what you received. Instead of standing in, by, with your achievement, what you end up doing is diluting it. Why? Because somewhere inside, you might not feel that you fully deserve it. And the justification here is a camouflage which protects you from what you feel might be potential envy or criticism, or even your own self-doubt. If you felt truly secure, you would say, yes, I earned it. Without any apologies, reasonings, explanations, or justifications. Here's another scenario, the financial justification. You buy a new expensive phone, an iPhone. And before anyone can comment, you'll say something like, it was on discount and I needed it for work and the old one was slowing down. Maybe all of that is true. But why rush to defend the purchase? Because money decisions, quite a bit of the time, carry some identity weight. These decisions, they reveal priorities and status and values. So we justify to avoid being judged as wasteful or flashy or irresponsible, perhaps even shallow. But if you truly felt aligned with your decision or your purchase, you would simply say, yes, I wanted it. That's it. Justifications tend to reveal a discomfort with desire. We are uncomfortable simply admitting that we wanted something. So we construct a logical framework, a scaffolding of sorts to support or justify what was actually an emotional decision, which is fine, really. All of our decisions don't need to be logical. The next one is a boundary justification, which is powerful. It happens so much of the time where we say no to a social invitation. Instead of saying, I won't be coming, what you do say is, I've been overwhelmed lately and I really need some time alone, and it's not about you, and I hope you understand. Now, kindness is important. Clarity is important, but over-explaining the implementation of a boundary is more or less an indicator of guilt that we're feeling. We justify boundaries when we feel they require permission. Secure boundaries don't need a lengthy defense. They are stated calmly, briefly, and respectfully. When we over-justify these sort of boundaries, it might reveal in us a fear of abandonment, a fear of being seen as selfish, perhaps a history where, because we said no, we might have been punished or there were undesirable consequences. So justification becomes a bit of a survival reflex, an instinct. But here's the thing, we're adults, we're human beings. We are allowed to choose our boundaries without apology. And now let's look at relationship justifications. A friend asks about your partner, and instead of saying something like, they're well, they're good, you might say something like, they're very busy, that's why they don't really keep in touch much, and they've had a difficult childhood, so they struggle with emotional expression, and so on. Now, here's what's happening. What you're doing is defending someone who was not attacked. Why? Because on some level, you're feeling guilty. Maybe you feel there's an imbalance that exists. Maybe you feel unseen. Maybe you're convincing yourself as much as you're convincing the other person. Justifications in relationships tend to reveal where we are rationalizing discomfort. We don't want to face the truth, so we explain it away. The more elaborate the justification, I say the deeper the insecurity. And then there is the career justification, which many of us have probably encountered in interviews, and someone asks, why did you leave your job? What a lot of us tend to say is something like, it wasn't the right environment, the leadership was unclear, and I needed growth, and it's all valid. But beneath the explanation lies some alternate notions. I was scared. I wasn't coping. I didn't feel good enough. Here, justifications are becoming narratives that are protecting our egos from painful truths. We're not, we're not lying, but we are framing somewhat selectively. Because our identities do tend to be fragile, yes? If we were completely secure, we might say something like, it wasn't aligned anymore. We're not being defensive at all. There's nothing rehearsed about it. It's just simple truths. And then we come to the health and fitness justifications, where we might skip the gym, and before anyone comments, we say something like, I had a long day and I didn't sleep well and my back feels tight. Do you notice the anticipatory defense over here? Nobody was accusing you. Nobody challenged you. And yet something inside was anticipating judgment, expecting judgment. Perhaps you were the one judging. Because that judgy voice is quite often internal. A lot of the time we tend to justify to others what we're actually justifying to ourselves. When our standards are rigid, when our sense of self, our self-images are brittle, we do tend to over-explain ourselves, especially with minor deviations. We are allowed to make mistakes. We're allowed to skip the gym. We're allowed to have off days. That's fine. Perhaps if we lower our own standards for ourselves and maybe for others, maybe we'll stop doing this. Because when we're secure, we don't justify every little screw-up, every fluctuation. We just adjust. We just accept it. Quietly. Now, let's take things a little deeper with moral justifications. Sometimes we justify behaviors that we question internally. I shouted because they pushed me too far, or I cheated because I wasn't getting attention, or I lied because it would have hurt them otherwise. And the louder the justification, the deeper the conflict we're feeling. When behavior and values are aligned, we don't need elaborate reasoning. But then, when there is dissonance, we build stories. Justification becomes a bridge between who we think we are and what we did. It becomes an attempt to protect our identity, and it has nothing to do with the truth. And finally, I hope you're not getting tired of these scenarios. Finally, we have the social media justification. Someone posts something controversial, and before there's a backlash, they'll add, this is just my opinion. Don't come at me, and if you don't like it, just scroll away. How many times have you seen this? A pre-defense, a preemptive shielding, where it reveals that they're expecting to be attacked. And I'm sure you already knew this one. An insecurity in the position that they hold, the authority that they might actually have. And if their opinions were truly grounded, they could be expressed calmly without any defensiveness. Defensive framing tends to reveal the anticipation of conflict, and anticipated conflict reveals fear. Now let's summarize what uninvited justifications reveal about us. Quite a bit of the time. A fear of judgment, a lack of self-trust, guilt, imposter syndrome, desire for approval, a fragility of our own identity, and bunches of internal conflict in different contexts. They reveal that we are not at peace. They're not evil. Justifications are not evil. They're signals. Justifications are psychological data pointing us towards areas where our own self-worth needs a little bit of strengthening. They're meant to be observed, not shamed or feel shameful about. Simple statements have a power to them. Imagine living in a way where you can say no without speaking a whole paragraph. You can accept praise without shrinking away from it or giving reasons instead of simply saying thank you. Where you can choose without defending your choices. Where you can succeed without downplaying your own success. Where you can rest without explaining. Where you can fail without having to explain it all over again. Living like that requires an inner solidity, a deep self-belief that I am allowed. I'm allowed to choose, I'm allowed to want, I'm allowed to fail, I'm allowed to succeed. And that when that belief is strong, you'll just find the justifications going away. Okay, now here's a practical exercise. Something you can try this week. Be aware of whenever you justify without being asked. And when you do, pause. Ask yourself, what am I protecting right now? Am I protecting my image? Is it my sense of belonging? Is it my self-concept? Who am I? What am I? What do I deserve? And then ask yourself again, what would it look like to simply state without defending? I'm not asking you to be blunt or insensitive. I'm talking about the reduction of unnecessary labor. I'm talking about trusting that your choices can stand just by themselves. They don't need to be explained or defended. Explanations can be healthy. And I'm not sure if this has come up in your mind before, but what is the difference between an explanation and a justification? An explanation is something that's collaborative in this context, while justification is defensive. An explanation says, here's my reasoning. A justification says, please don't judge me. You see the difference. One is grounded, the other is anxious. Can you feel the difference in tone? Chaliye, let's close this here. Justifications are fascinating, honestly. They're like these small cracks in a mirror, revealing where we are still tender. And tenderness is not a weakness. It is just where we haven't finished integrating with ourselves fully. If you find yourself justifying often, there's no need to criticize yourself. It is more about examining yourself. So ask yourself, where and what areas of myself do I still seek permission to be who and what I am, permission to exist as I do? Where do I still need external validation? Where do I doubt my own authority, my legitimacy, the roles that I play? And treat every unnecessary justification as an invitation. An invitation to build self-trust, to strengthen boundaries, to live with a little more internal authority. And over time, here's what I promise you'll notice. Your sentences will become shorter. Your tone will become calmer. Your presence will become steadier. And that need to explain will begin to fade away. And this isn't because you have become indifferent or you don't care about others. That's what a lot of people tend to say. I don't care about the opinions of others, which I don't think is the right way to go about things, but that's a story for another day. But what's happening here is that you have become secure. The more you feel the need to say, I don't care, it means you care. And when you become secure, you don't need to shout. You can simply be as you are. Thank you for listening. I hope this helped. Please do observe your justifications. If you have comments, please do share in wherever you're seeing this or in the WhatsApp community. And I'll see you shortly.